in many ways, disengaged from the political process. Politics has become a spectator sport. Many of the best and the brightest in America became too cool to care, thought politics was too toxic, left it to other people, figured political people were taking care of this or taking care of that. So there's a change in us that has to happen. We have to take responsibility for the fact, and I think that we are. I do think there's a profound awakening that's been going on for the last 2 years. I don't feel Americans are asleep anymore. I think we're awake, but now we have to harness our awakening. That's number one. Number two, there are millions of American children who are living in chronic trauma and despair. Millions of American children who go to school every day in schools where there aren't even the minimum school supplies that are necessary to be able to adequately teach a child to read. If a child cannot read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically diminished, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. In the richest country in the world, we have millions of American children who live in the chronic trauma, not only of what I just mentioned, but we have in the United States what's called domestic war zones. These children live in homes, communities, neighborhoods, where psychologists tell us that the PTSD that these children are experiencing is no less severe than the PTSD of a returning veteran from Iraq or Afghanistan. And yet with these children, it's not even post-traumatic situation because there's nothing post about it. The trauma of these children is triggered and re-triggered every day. Now, let's talk about the sociopathology, however, of our economic and our political system. These children aren't old enough to vote, so there aren't a constituency, are they? And they aren't old enough to work, therefore they have no financial leverage. So they cannot compete with the economic clout of these major corporate lobbyists that just rule within our Congress and our White House. And so these children, these millions of children who live this way, I believe, and I'm asking you to join with me and see this should be seen as a humanitarian crisis. This should be seen as a national emergency. And yet, in a system where if you don't have the money to play in Washington, forget this business about all men have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Are these children not full citizens? No, they are full citizens. But if our government is instituted to secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where are the rights of these children to pursue happiness? And we're the only country that bases our education funding on property taxes. So if a child is in a poor neighborhood, that child is less likely to get a quality education, which will only increase the trajectory of poverty. Now, what we're told about our economic system is that this is the way to have economic vibrancy. This is the way to take care of our economy. Can we talk for a minute? This attitude and this philosophy of economics that we've been talking about tonight has destroyed our middle class. What it has done is to turn us into a situation where in the richest nation on the earth, 40% of our citizens are having a struggle to meet basic food, rent, transportation, and health costs. I had a real problem with the fact that those federal workers, for instance, why should it be in America? The people who work in jobs like they work are that close to the cliff to begin with. We have 62% of all Americans who are not deemed part of the middle class. This economic system that we're all taught is the way that, we're going to have economic, it has nothing to do with planning economic vibrancy 20 years from now. It is a leeching from our economic vibrancy. It is not a giving of our economic vibrancy. I'll tell you what you do if you want to take care of your economy 10 years from now. Take care of your 10-year-olds today. Greatness of our economy 10 years from now, go into any American kindergarten, because that's where it is. You want to see the entrepreneurial spirit of the American mind? Look into any kindergarten, any neighborhood, anywhere in America. Our economic system was designed by men before a time when women had any voice in the public sphere, and before a time when most of those men were home with their little children. Men today, it's a different scene. Men today are around their little kids, more likely to say, wow, that's smart. No kidding. Neurologists tell us it all happens in the first 8 years of life. The brain of a child before the 8 years of life, the capacity to learn information, cognitive functioning, and to retain information is so beyond anything that happens later. We should have, and if I'm ever president of the United States, we will have a massive realignment of investment in the direction of America's children, particularly children in the developing countries. Tells you that doesn't make economic sense, don't you buy it for a minute. Every dollar you put in education is an investment in your economy. The spirit of the American people, the productivity of the American people, the creativity of the American people, the dignity of the American people, that is our wealth. Cultivate it, invest in it. That's the American dream, and that is the American way. And that which we've been propagandized to think, no, has nothing to do with planning for economic vibrancy or any other kind of vibrancy. This is the way a veiled aristocratic system has turned the majority of Americans into a new class of serf. We should not take this. Americans do not stand for tyranny, economic or any other kind. Personal growth, work, transformation, religious, spiritual. There is the universal spiritual theme that you've got to make yourself right with the God of your understanding. Abraham Lincoln said a nation must confess its sins just like an individual must. In AA, they talk about admitting your own character defects. In order for America to transform, and this is why I'm here, because the traditional politician says, let's just fix things on the outside. Even if we fix things on the outside, on the level of the externals, they can come around 2 years later and repeal whatever it was. They can come around 4 years later and repeal whatever it was. We have to take these things inside us. A lot of this work has to be done by us. And one of the character defects of the American mind, and this has been with us from the beginning, is racism. Now, I don't think the average American is a racist. I don't. But I do believe that the average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in this country, particularly since the end of the Civil War. In the end of the Civil War, General Tecumseh Sherman promised every former slave 40 acres and a mule. We've all heard about that. 40 acres and a mule. But that's not just some quaint saying. Think about what that would mean. You were a slave. You're no longer a slave. But how are you going to make a living? How are you going to live? Well, you've been an agricultural worker, a forced agricultural worker as a slave. But if you're given 40 acres and a mule, what does that give you? A chance for a life. A chance for a life. Very few were actually given the 40 acres and a mule, and of those who were given it, once the federal troops left in 1877, most of them had the land and the mules taken away from them. At that time, throughout the South, there were passed what was called, throughout Southern legislatures, they were called black code laws. And these laws were to ensure subpar political, social, and economic opportunities for former slaves. Ku Klux Klan, black code laws, John Birch Society, and by the end of the century, remember the war's over in 1865, federal troops remained in the South to ensure that the institution of slavery could not reinstate itself. They leave in 1877. It's interesting because before 1877, there were a lot of black people who became mayors and became congressmen and senators, etc. Once the troops left, Southern legislators would have none of it. By the end of the century, you have the full-on spate of lynchings, the hanging not only of black people, but of whites who supported them. So that by the end of the 20th century, you're to full-on institutionalized white supremacy and segregation. None of that was fundamentally challenged until the 1960s. So let's talk about what the timeline is here. You've got slavery that lasts over 200 years, and then you've got 100 years after that, which is a phase, an iteration of violence.